Are you busy or busy making money? They aren't necessarily the same thing. In a nutshell, production is how much gets done. Productivity is how efficiently. Spending $10 in labor to sell an item for $10 counts as production, but is not productive. That kind of thing happens more often than people admit to themselves. Solopreneur or Amazon, the concept is the same. Here are a few ideas.
Reseller tip number 1.
If you have the capacity to list 100 items per week and you have 1,000 waiting to list, you should stop buying until that backlog is brought down. Buying is fun, completing sales puts money in the bank. All that inventory is just stacks of dollar bills. Inventory waiting to be listed is unproductive. It seldom gets more valuable hiding on a shelf or in a box. For example, I once bought the remnants of a franchised Radio Shack store that had closed. It was all little stuff that filled 33 20-gallon totes. Literally thousands and thousands of items. Thankfully, duplicates of a lot of pieces. This wasn't in my normal niche, but it was a deal too good to pass up. That was all I listed for several months. It was really hard to abandon my core categories to focus on small electronics. Doing so, I banked over 10x my investment on that one buy. Much better than my normal return. That profit eventually allowed me to grow my core categories much faster than I otherwise could have.
To summarize this tip,
when you have turned enough money into stuff, focus on turning that stuff back into more money.
Tip number 2.
What is the labor cost to get X amount of merchandise listed? Let's look at a theoretical example. Your mileage will vary. Using the 100 items a week example, let's make some assumptions. If you want to gross, let's say, $50 per hour, and your average item sells for $20 and your sell-through is 75%, 75 items will sell for gross revenue of $1,500. You still have to list 100 items to generate that $1,500. $1,500 divided by your hourly rate of $50 gives you 30 hours, or 0.3 hours per item list time. Listing isn't the only thing that takes time. Let's estimate that listing time is half of the time you put in this business. Other investments include acquisition, storing, packing and shipping, administration, and so on. That cuts your time to list each item in half, giving you 0.15 hours per item, or about 9 minutes. With very few exceptions, it shouldn't take anywhere near that long to create a single listing. Once you know your target, you can have some fun with it by simply timing yourself. You can stopwatch each item, or the total items listed in a session. Either way, knowing and working to improve on that number will make you more money. I suggest tracking productivity even if you are the only one doing the work. Knowledge is power, it's also profit.
Some possible improvements.
How is your workspace set up? How many actual physical steps do you have to take to create a listing? Walking around is a huge time and profit killer. Experiment with the setup of your space. Be intentional about what goes where, saving physical steps. What needs to be handy? What isn't used often and can be stored further away? What is involved in setting up the photo shoot for each item? How well does your equipment and software work together? What steps can be automated? Experiment with your listing process. Is it faster for you to do a single listing at once, or faster to do batches of photographs, then batch listing, and so on? It's worth finding ways to get a little better every week.
Bullet point tips.
You can raise your average sold price per item by focusing on higher value goods to increase your hourly rate. It takes about the same amount of time to list a $20 item as a $50 item. You can increase your sell-through percent by right pricing slow sellers to do the same. Get your cash out and put it to work in other stuff.
In a full-size US thrift store, it might look something like this.
People working 40 labor hours at, let's say, $20 per hour labor expense gets you to a $800 cost. If they produce 1,000 pieces in those 40 hours, you are at 80-cent production labor cost per item. That's 25 pieces per hour produced, too terrible to be realistic. If your sell-through is 50% as it is in many US thrift stores, the actual production labor cost per piece sold is $1.60. That's not counting the rest of the staff and all those other pesky expenses.
Yikes.
Those same people putting out 5,000 pieces creates a labor cost of 16 cents per item. That's processing 125 items per hour. Depending on the skill, tools, and processes in place, that can be a doable number. If you don't think that's realistic, let's dial it back to 75 per hour. That's 3,000 pieces with a direct labor cost of 26 cents each, or 52 cents at 50% sell-through. Manageable. These are averages, as some categories naturally take less time per item than others. Books go fast, sorting jewelry not so fast.
Documenting work.
I suggest tracking work closely and regularly by documenting pieces produced. One person or a dozen, the idea is the same. A simple spreadsheet with each person's daily total tells an amazing tale. Knowledge truly is power. It's also profit. Especially if you are a solopreneur, you are in charge of how powerful you become.
Today's quote: "If you aim at nothing, you will hit it every time." Zig Ziglar.